Uh, Welcome everybody to Voices of Recovery. I'm Chad with Wilkes Recovery Revolution at R3 Center. Today we've got a special guest here to talk about his experience with substance use disorder and recovery. He's a good friend of mine. He's a good friend of the recovery community here in North Wilkesboro. I'll turn it over to Brad.
Hey guys, we're back, I think. We'll see what happens this time. Anyway, my name's Brad. I was asked to do this by my buddy Chad, and I've learned that part of this program is giving back. It's kind of an eye-opening experience when I first showed up. But I guess the point of today is to tell you a little bit about me, what it was like, what happened, and what life's like now. So I guess we'll start. My sobriety date is June 20th of 2016. It's roughly 5 years. I guess we're coming up on 5 years in a little while, but it's about 1,709 days, but who's counting? And I don't use that figure, a day figure, as it's not really a badge of honor by any stretch of the imagination. Really, it is the idea that I've got 1,709 days of practice. When I was 3 days sober, I wasn't very good at this. There was a lot of stuff going on in my head, and we'll get into all of that. But I was born in Colorado on April the 28th, 1980. So that makes me almost 41 years old. I grew up in upstate New York. Moved to North Carolina when I was about 21. I'd say the fun really started for me a little bit before that. But I grew up in a home that was, it was full of love. My father is actually also a person in recovery. And, I was fortunate to, at a very young age, get brought up with the idea that it's a disease. Of course, I was pretty convinced with the fact that I wasn't going to get it. That's not exactly how it works, as I came to find out. But I grew up in like I said, it was a home full of love. I never wanted for anything. I did fairly well in school, almost kind of by default, and but I always had a little bit of a wild side. Starting in my teens, I sort of started experimenting with things, and I suppose that's something that all kids get into. Maybe they don't. I don't know. I did. And I guess some do, and it doesn't stick. But as it turns out, it kind of stuck for me, and I ended up going to college in 1997. I was a little bit young to be starting school. I finished high school a little bit early, and I think that's when sort of the freedom and not having some adult caregivers at my side, it was sort of sink or swim. And I don't want to say that I sank, but my head was certainly bobbing up and down, above and below the water at times. For as well as I did in my early years in school, college was not like that for me. I did manage to finish somehow, but the seeds for I think what later became my alcoholism were planted, and they may have been planted long before college. I believe that this thing is I think that it's a genetic deal. I think that it gets passed on. Some of us get it, some of us don't. And for me, it was something that I sort of had to, as silly as it sounds, I sort of had to work at it. I don't know exactly when I crossed that invisible line. I would say it was probably in my mid-20s. But, drinking for me was never anything that I did in moderation. I don't do a whole lot of stuff in moderation, as I've come to find out. But, through my, and I'm not going to spend my time telling you all war stories. That's not why I'm here. the reason that I mentioned that 1,709 days is because, when I first started doing this at about a year sober, I didn't have a lot of experience living this lifestyle. My what led up to getting sober seemed to be a lot longer than the actual part of my recovery. And today, that's changed. I've got some decent recovery under my belt, and it doesn't matter how long I've been sober. All I have to do is not drink today, not use drugs today, and try to behave like I guess like a grown up. I don't know. That's also the jury's still a little bit out on that one. But things for me, I'm a 12-step guy. I spend a lot of time in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I spend a lot of time around people who are engaged in that fellowship. That's not to say that there aren't other ways to get and stay sober. I'm not here to beat that drum. I'm here to sort of talk about what the lifestyle of recovery has done for me. So, as I said, moderation wasn't anything that I really did. While I identify as a recovering alcoholic, I was also a bit of let's just say, a garbage disposal of things. I didn't really discriminate as to what I was going to put into my body. It was a hodgepodge mix of anything that really made me feel different. And, it wasn't until I started to work a program of recovery that I got to recognize why all that was. At first I like to say that I was sort of a victim of cultural circumstance. The screwed up part about that whole being a victim of cultural circumstance was that I created the culture so that it fit my agenda. When I was in college, you party, do what you do in college, and then that's part of the culture. So that's what I did. After leaving school, I was in the golf business. Golf professionals. Historically, I kind of created this idea that, that was part of that culture. And part of the culture was to drink. It was to, go out with your golf pro buddies. It was to do all of those things. And so I fit right into it, as things progressed for me. I guess in about 2004, I got out of the golf business and started working, traveling around the country, opening new stores for some retailers. And now I could adopt the idea of this work hard, play hard. What happens on the road stays on the road. And, I lived that life for a handful of years where it was, it was a lot of hard work. It was a lot of travel. It was a lot of partying. And, eventually for people like, I'll say us, I don't know, for people that either do or don't find recovery, this thing either catches up with us and we get it together and we get sober, or we end up in jail, or we die. And that's the stark truth of it. It's really kind of this, it's really sad to me now, having been able to put some time under my belt. But after leaving the sort of the new store setup world, I started my own practice in the insurance business, and now I was my own boss, which, as I came to find out, at the age that I was my own boss, I wasn't quite ready for that responsibility. I had the ability to make my own hours. Again, my cultural circumstance that I had put myself into, in my mind, made it okay for me to drink what I wanted, work when I wanted, do what I wanted. And needless to say, things there, I didn't work out so well. The one thing recovery has taught me is that I have to laugh at myself every now and again. Not taking things so dang serious is it's an important part of my program. If I start taking things too serious, I find that I'm not staying right-sized. I'm not practicing the humility that I should be. And, the long and the short of it is I'm not that dang important. But after the insurance business, now this is where things start to get really exciting. A friend of mine and I decided to get involved in the bar and restaurant business. And I will tell you, for somebody who is probably in active alcoholism at the time, there is not a whole lot more appealing than a job where you can give yourself the justification that it's okay to drink. And so that was what really lit the fire. I think this was about 2014, about that time. And I had worked in, I had some part-time gigs bartending and, here and there. And it wasn't until I actually had the keys to a bar that things really started to take hold, By the time that I had gotten into that, which was, like I said, the end of 2014, 2015, 34, 35 years of age for me, the wick was lit and it was burning hot. And it had gotten to the point for me where I wasn't really drawing sober breaths during the waking hours of the day. I would get up and going to work for me. By the end of my drinking, it was about maintenance drinking. It was about trying to feel better. The only way I could feel better was to put poison in my body. And, it was a pretty horrible cycle. There was a lot of ups and downs. There were a lot of personal relationships that I played a hand in not nurturing very well. I guess we'll put it that way. And it got to the point where I had gone, we'll fast forward to Father's Day weekend of 2016. I had been, we're not going to say asked to leave my place of residence, but I had to go find a couch to sleep on for a little while. And like any good alcoholic, my mindset was, well, if you think that was drunk, watch this. And that started a series of events that initially pretty much got me sober. I spent my last week of drinking it was not pretty. It was a really dark time, to say the least. A gray. I don't want to say that there were blackouts, but there's not a whole lot of memorable stuff that happened. And every Father's Day, I try to go home to upstate New York from North Carolina and visit with my family. And I can remember that I was supposed to leave early Saturday morning and probably get home around, middle of the afternoon. And I don't believe that I arrived until about 1 a.m. on Sunday, because I couldn't operate a motor vehicle. By the time I got there, I walked into my parents' house, the house that I grew up in, and my mom, of course, was curious as to why I was so tardy. And I'll never forget the look that I got. It was not a look of disappointment. It was not a look of anything other than the 600 miles that had insulated me from my family. It all came to a head right then, and I can remember seeing the look on her face when she realized that her son had a problem. And I think that was I think I knew I had a problem for a while at this point, but I wasn't ready to look at it. So I spent Father's Day at home, and kind of a fuzzy day of drinking. And I can remember deciding in the middle of the night that I was going to go back to North Carolina and I was going to try to repair all that I had wrecked. And I can tell you that wasn't a great idea. The folks that I was trying to, at the time, I'm not sure what my grand plan was, but regardless, it didn't work. There was nothing that I could do to repair the damage that I had done in my personal life. Not to mention that, my professional life wasn't looking real hot. And, my financial situation wasn't great either. And, at that point, I can remember about halfway into Virginia, which is a little more than halfway between New York and North Carolina, early in the morning, on the phone with my mom. And the conversation, she almost didn't have to say it. And I can't remember if I beat her to the punch or not. But it was the idea, and this is the first time it had ever come up, is maybe, Brad, maybe you need to get some help with your consumption of alcohol. You know, that was a bit of an understatement, but, you know, I told her that I would. So that was, I got home early on a Monday morning, and, you know, from the time that I had the keys to a bar, I don't know that there was a day that I was not in there that I didn't take a drink. And something happened to me on that Monday. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was going to do. You know, I sort of grew up in the rooms of AA with a father who was a recovering alcoholic. But again, that wasn't for me. I wasn't one of those. So I had created this idea of what I thought that was like. And much as I've come to realize, like the things that I formulate in my head, my preconceived notions are about 99% of the time they're wrong. That is one thing that this program has taught me, amongst a bunch of other things that I'm going to, you know, kind of spend most of our time talking about today. So, you know, they say in the rooms that, you know, that God can do for you what you can't do for yourself. And I struggled with the idea of God for a really long time, because I really didn't like the idea of being told what to do. I didn't think you know, for me personally, growing up, I would say a non-practicing Methodist, I think is a pretty accurate description. I didn't like the idea that somebody could stand behind a piece of wood in the front of a church and tell me whether I was or wasn't going to heaven or hell. And, you know, it was more, I guess, ignorance and lack, I guess just lack of faith is what it was. And that was nobody's fault but my own. But that Monday, for some reason, I didn't drink when I had gone in to do a little work at the restaurant. And, you know, it was a very strange thing for me. But that day I did reach out to an old friend of mine who had gotten sober about 6 years prior. And we hadn't had much contact because I recognize now why. You know, at the time, you know, he wasn't drinking and being an idiot anymore, and I still was. And this way of life is, that's one of the tough parts about it in the beginning, is the idea of making new friends, going to new places and doing new things. You know, I found historically, you know, folks who get into the rooms or get into recovery programs are generally pretty hard-headed, pretty strong-willed, and pretty damn stubborn. And, you know, so I reached out to him and I simply asked him where the closest meeting was, and when it was. And he got right back with me. And I went to my first meeting on June the 21st of 2016. And I did not have any intention of staying sober. I went to that meeting to try to get back what I was losing or had already lost. It was sort of trying to apply I don't even know if it's a tourniquet, maybe a loosely fitting tourniquet, to try to stop the mess and the bleeding and, you know. So when I went to that first meeting, I did not feel very well. You know, I'm approximately 36 hours sober. I'm shaky. I'm sick. It was probably the most scared I'd ever been, where I recognized how much fear that I had. I was not looking forward to it, but I felt like it was something that I needed to at least try, you know. But like I said, I didn't have any intention of staying sober. I was going to do the thing that I had always done, which was kind of plug along long enough to get people off my ass. And then I was going to go back to the way things were. I had absolutely zero intention of staying sober when I first showed up in the rooms. But something started to happen, and it was such a bizarre thing for me, you know. At 36 years old, I showed up and I ran into somebody that I had known for a long time, who had been sober at that time for about a little more than 4 years. Actually, he was 4 years and 1 week sober when I ran into him. And, you know, I could tell that he was kind of surprised to see me. And so much so that he looked at me and he said, "Brad, I've been saving you a seat." He said, "I didn't think you'd get here this early." And, that was a realization for me that, and I recognize it now that we know our own. Um, when we have the ability to sort of be graced with this disorder, this disease, this whatever you want to call it, it really doesn't matter. For me, I identify as an alcoholic. I recognize it as, this thing is serious. It's, when I think about the idea of a disease, I think about, if I ask somebody what the most fatal disease that they can think of is, most of the time they'll turn to some kind of cancer, even the worst kinds of cancers. If you're diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, they give you what, a 5% chance of living. I'm not a doctor, so I'm just guessing on that one. But I can tell you that if you are an alcoholic or suffer from addiction or anything of the sort, and you don't figure out a way to put a stop to it, there's 100% chance that this disease will kill you. It's no joke. And, I've been hanging around these rooms long enough to see the two alternatives. Either we get sober, we work a program, one way or another, whatever that program may be, or we don't. And our lives generally end a lot earlier than maybe they could have. But anyway, so he said, "I've been saving you a seat. I'm glad you're here." And it aggravated me a little bit, but at the same time, it helped me to recognize that that it wasn't a big secret as to what was going on in my life. And looking back on it, it was not a big secret as to what was going on in my life. I was drinking from the time that I woke up pretty much until the time I hit the pillow and I passed out. And I would wake up sick, and I would wake up just feeling awful. And the only alternative for me at that point was then to take another drink first thing in the morning, which when you have keys to a bar is pretty handy, as I came to find out. Being a bar owner was the greatest blessing and the greatest curse that ever happened to me. It accelerated my dependency on alcohol 1,000%. But, I came to find out, and I'll get more into this, that just because I'm around it doesn't mean I have to do it. But we'll cross that bridge in a minute. So I met some people in the rooms that day, and quite simply, the only thing they told me was keep coming back. And like, all right, maybe I will. And I really looked at it as I've still got a couple more weeks that I have to keep doing this so that people will quit bothering me. I'll dry out a little bit and I'll go back to the normal moderate drinking that I was doing. There is nothing normal or moderate about the way that I drink alcohol. So I kept going to these meetings. I kept hearing these people. I got a little bit freaked out. They told me, don't drink, pray, and go to meetings. And, I didn't like that. I felt, my level of self-importance when I was 2 days sober was, it's almost laughable. Because this idea of don't drink, I was like, maybe I can do that for a little while. The idea of prayer was a very difficult thing for me, and I'll tell you why. It was because I was running so much on self-will and my own selfish behavior that the idea of whatever you want to call it, a higher power, God, it didn't exist for me. I was running the show. And looking back on it, it didn't work out so good either. And then this other idea of going to meetings, I was, again, my self-importance told me that I don't have time for this. I don't have time to go to these meetings, and I don't have time, I'm an important business owner, which at the time also quite laughable. But I ended up coming back. And, I don't know how long I shook for, a couple of weeks, but I can remember pretty early in my recovery hearing some things that really stuck with me. One of them was the idea of remaining teachable. And, that for me, that was really important. It was really important for me to hear that, and I heard it right at the right time. Because I always seemed to, from an academic standpoint, teachability was always kind of, it always came pretty naturally for me. And I thought, well, if I just apply that to this, heck, my life will be great in no time. Things did start to get better for me. They didn't get better as quickly as I would have liked them to. But nothing ever happens as quickly as I'd like it to. You know, at about 3 or 4 days sober, when I started to kind of feel a little bit better, you know, I'd been to about 3 or 4 meetings, and I figured, oh, I got this thing figured out. You know, I'm ready for one of those 1-year chips. I'm one of them fancy blue ones. And, you know, I was an idiot. You know, I'm still kind of an idiot. I'm just a little more, I can recognize the fact that I'm an idiot now. You know, I've got the ability to sort of at times not act on my first thought, or not say what's in my head at the time. And that's taken a lot of practice, to be honest with you. But so I continued to go to these meetings, and then they tell me to go, you got to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I'm like, all right, you know, you people and all your rules, because I had no intention. 90, that's 3 months. I hadn't been sober for 3 days in years. Y'all want me to stay sober for 3 months? This is nuts. But I started being a bar owner in early sobriety. I can tell you that I don't recommend it, not one bit. It's difficult because the only thing that was stopping me from picking up a drink at that point with a handful of people, not even a handful, 2 people. There were 2 people in those rooms that I knew from years ago who had gotten sober, and I really just didn't want to look like an idiot. It was pride and selfish behavior that kept me sober in the beginning. They told me to come to 90 meetings in 90 days, and if I didn't like it, I didn't have to come back. I actually had one guy tell me, if you come to 90 meetings in 90 days and you still want to go out and drink, I'll take you. I got tricked on that one. But when I was 90 days sober, I'd been to 168 meetings. And I don't say that to brag. That's not what this is about. I say that because I needed that many damn meetings to stay sober. I needed to show up every day, and I needed to give myself to this program because what I was doing wasn't working. It hadn't been working for quite some time. And, you know, I started to find out that these simple little things that these folks were talking about, while they weren't easy, they were simple. So I kept going to meetings, and, you know, I can remember hearing, you know, just do what's suggested of you. You know, you don't have to, but, you know, the one thing I remember is you know, almost, it's an unconditional love that I got when I showed up. Like, nobody in that room owed me a thing. And when I showed up, they were kind. They were pretty gentle with me. But they didn't lie to me. That was an important part of this thing for me. Nobody was in there blowing smoke. It was, hey, if you want to get better, you're going to have to put in the work. You're going to have to show up to these meetings. You're going to have to get a sponsor, and you're going to have to work steps. And I can remember the first time I read those steps on the wall, I'm like, all right, I can get down with that. I can, you know, it was like this cafeteria plan. You know, I'm going to pick and choose what I want because that's what I've done. You know, cafeteria plans are for 2 things: supplemental insurance and cafeterias, not for a 12-step program. That's my experience with it. I had to be willing to work all of them. But the cool thing for me was I only had to work one at a time, you know, and that has become really a cornerstone of my recovery, is just kind of taking things as they come. But that took a lot of learning. It took a lot of eye-opening experiences for me to recognize that I don't have a whole lot of control over a whole lot of things. But so I decided, like, okay, I'm gonna keep coming to these meetings, and I would say I was about 2 weeks in, it was time to get a sponsor. You know, I had kind of been floating on just showing up to meetings twice a day. It was breaking my day up. And for me, being able to make it to my next meeting without taking a drink was really important. I downloaded a sobriety day counter, and I literally would stay up every night just past midnight just to see it flip another day, because I hadn't been 8 days sober, 9 days sober in I don't know how long. I figured out I can make it somewhere between 36 and 54 hours on my own. That's not a real good track record. So they told me, find somebody that you like what they have and ask them to be your sponsor. And, you know, part of me wanted to ask some of the folks that I'd known from before, but the other part of me thought that it was probably in my best interest to ask a complete stranger, somebody who the only thing I knew about him was that I liked what he had to say, and he seemed to attend a lot of meetings. So that's what I did. When we had our first conversation now, and it's funny, you know, it looks like asking somebody out on a date. I was nervous, you know. I guess I'm gonna have to talk to this guy and ask him, you know, to be my new friend. But, you know, after a pretty quick conversation, he said, here's what I ask of you. He said, just start with calling me every day and read the first 164 pages in this blue book. Like, all right, gotta call you every day. I don't really understand what that's all about, but I'll give it a shot. So every day I start calling and I keep reading this book, and you know, I get through my first 164 pages, and I've had a couple of weeks of conversations with this guy, and you know, I find that he has some practical, very simple solutions to what to me at the time were these life-altering problems. You know, the fact of the matter was I had some issues chemically going on in my brain where, you know, I learned now it's called post-acute withdrawal syndrome. Basically, my brain's not working right because every time I want to feel good, I've put something inside me that essentially turns out to be poison. Well, I took the poison away. My brain didn't really know what to do. So I was an emotional basket case in early sobriety. And look, that's how it goes for a lot of us. And that's what's so important, or was so important for me, to continue to go to these meetings. I had to learn how to be vulnerable and talk about the things that were bothering me. And, you know, that was the other crazy thing for me. I think the three things that kept me coming back in the very beginning were the unconditional kindness that I was shown. I was just a stranger off the street who was sick and shaky. Look, you know, I didn't know what was going to become of my life, and honestly, I really still don't. The second thing was that nobody, you know, they talked about God, but they didn't, like, I got to choose. Like, oh, I can kind of make my own. Like, this is pretty cool, you know. And I think maybe at first I was going to use it as a cop out, but I recognized that that's just not the way that it goes. You know, I can choose to create this idea of a higher power that works for me, and it's been an evolution over the years. You know, I was so indignant about prayer in the beginning that my prayers would start because my mom and dad have a pretty decent God consciousness. Hey, mom and dad's God, this is Brad. If you're as good as they say you are, help me stay sober today. Got tricked into that one too. But, you know, it started to work for me, and I started to see this idea of faith slowly creep into my life. You know, the third thing, I may have lost my train of thought. I got to think about what that third thing was. Oh, the third thing was when I had this idea that nobody had ever been through the difficult things that I've been through. Nobody had any idea what it was like to go through these feelings that I was having. And when I learned how to be vulnerable and open up to this room of strangers, I found that when I was talking about stuff that I had going on, like, I'm looking at these folks and half of them are nodding their head because they know what I'm talking about. You know, that was really important for me because I was taught very early that I needed to go into identify, not compare. And I saw folks that were identifying with what was so unique to special little Brad. And, you know, that's when I learned that there was something to this. There was something to this strength in numbers in this fellowship. There was something to the strength in numbers in recovery. so I kept going. And then after I finished those first 164 pages with my sponsor and we were having our daily phone calls, we started working steps together, and I didn't know what that meant. He told me to get a notebook and a pencil. I'm like, all right, if you say so, man, you know more about this than I do. So that's what we got to work. He told me from the very start, we're going to get to work on this thing. And, I didn't have much of a choice at that point. I was still trying to hang on to some past relationships and trying to make some things work and try to, just, I guess, trying to rebuild my life. But, I ended up kind of by default, more out of spite, staying sober for those first 90 days. And that guy that told me go to 90 meetings in 90 days, if you still want to drink, I'll take you to the bar, was right. Like, after that, there was no looking back. I was taught that this idea of recovery is a lifestyle. It's what we do when we recover. We stay engaged with this fellowship, but we make this part of what we do. The crux of this program is connection. I don't believe that that sobriety is the opposite of addiction. I believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, and I believe that connection leads to sobriety and recovery. That to me is and that connection comes in a bunch of different forms. It comes through the fellowships, if you choose to attend one, whatever it may be. It comes through this connection to my idea of a higher power. It comes from connection with other people that I work with outside of the rooms, whether it be folks here at the Recovery Center or be guys that I sponsor or my sponsor. Those are really important tools for me because, I'm never alone anymore, ever. Even if I'm by myself, there's always a phone call that can be made. There's always, usually my phone is ringing, somebody else is reaching out or just having daily conversations with the guys that I work with. But so I started to work these steps, and I can remember seeing on the wall this thing. It said, "Trust God, clean house, help others." I was like, I don't know about that first one. I suppose I can do some house cleaning, and yeah, I can help other people. Like, that's cool. I didn't have a clue at the time that I didn't know how to help anybody. I could barely help myself. I didn't show up in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous because I was on a winning streak. Things in my life were not going well. I needed something different. And, it just kind of worked out that way. I sort of tripped and fell into recovery because I wanted to get people off my ass. And today, this is what I do. This is the cornerstone of my life. But so again, I saw that and I was like, well, I realized I didn't realize it. It was told to me that that's basically a breakdown of these steps. The first 3 steps are trust God, 4 through 10 are the maintenance steps, clean house, 11 and 12 are help others. And I realized when I started working steps why they're in order. I had to. The first 3 steps for me were really important because I had to recognize that it wasn't about me. I had to, and it didn't matter what my higher power was. And that's the thing. I got to make my own, and it's not about, it's not the God of my childhood. It's not the God that's in maybe other churches. It may not even be the same God of the same people in those rooms. And that was the wonderful thing to me. Nobody was trying to cram down my throat what they thought I should believe. Those middle 4 steps, like that 4th step sort of terrified me because I didn't know what I like. A searching and fearless moral inventory. Ooh, that doesn't sound like any fun. But then again, I realized, and this is sort of a snapshot of pretty much my I don't want to say my whole life, but a lot of it was that I created these ideas of what I thought things were, and then I became afraid of them because I made them up. Like it's a bit silly. But, I'd never done a 4th step. What the heck would I be scared of? An idea that I created in my head. So, my sponsor, he has the ability, and still today, has the ability to help guide me a little bit. Say, hey, man, look, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to take it in small bites. And, before you know it, I was working the steps and I started to feel better. And I started to see some of the stuff that these programs talk about coming true. You know, it's been an eye-opening journey for me. It's been an eye-opening series of events for sure. You know, having worked the steps and trying to work them on a daily basis, you know, it's taught me a lot about humility. It's taught me a lot about self-importance. It's taught me a lot about, you know, staying connected. You know, for me today, you know, this program, look, AA and 12 steps saved my life. The people in these rooms saved my life. You know, but I had to be willing, you know, you don't just show up into these rooms and get bopped on the head with the sober fairy. She doesn't just show up, say, okay, well, Brad, you've been to 8 meetings, your life's better. You know, there was a lot of stuff that I had to look at, and I had to dig up some stuff that wasn't terribly pleasant. But what this program does now, what it's taught me, is that I have the ability, I don't really have any problems today. I've got some situations that pop up every now and again, but because I choose to stay sober one day at a time, and that's the other thing, like this idea of going to meetings every day for the rest of your life, or this idea of staying sober every day for the rest of your life, you know, that's something that I think that we create in our heads. I don't have to stay, I have no intention of staying sober for the rest of my life, but I do have every intention of staying sober today. You know, that's a lot easier for me to wrap my head around. And I've been fortunate enough to do that, you know, 1,709 days in a row, you know, and that's, I've got more practice at it. You know, I try to do 5 things every day when it comes to my recovery. And I've heard this. There was a couple that had showed up as guests at my home group meeting, and I don't know that I was 30 days sober, but this guy said I try to do 5 things every day. He said the first thing I do is I start my day with prayer. I ask my higher power to help keep me sober. Second thing I do at some point during the day is I attend a meeting. The third thing that I do every day is I call my sponsor. So the fourth thing that I do every day is I try to help somebody. The fifth thing that I do every day is when my head hits the pillow, just thank my higher power for keeping me sober another day. And I'll tell you, you know, those 5 things, they take about an hour and a half. And an hour, that's a meeting. If I'm not willing to invest an hour and a half of my day into staying sober and living a better life, I probably don't want to be sober. You know, that was a sort of this realization that I came to. You know, getting sober is not easy. Staying sober is easier. You know, when I don't make this program, I don't overcomplicate it. When I show up on a daily basis, just by default, I can almost stay sober at this point. You know, in the beginning, I hung on for dear life. You know, I was working in a bar every day. I had keys to a bar. It was almost torture. I can remember the first conversation that I had with my sponsor. I said, hey man, do I have to find a new job? Do I have to sell half a bar? How does this work? And I'll never forget what he said to me. And that's what this program has done for me. The people in it and the program itself has done a wonderful job of changing my perception. And it gives me the ability to look at things from a completely different angle. But he said, I don't know. He said, let me call you back. I've got to think about this. And my phone rang and I picked it up. He said, okay. And see, this is the thing. He's got the ability to trick me and get me to agree with him. And then I painted myself into some corner. So he said, all right, Brad, I want you to imagine that you work at a toxic waste plant. I'm like, all right. So, you know, I'm like 4 days sober. Okay. All right, I'm in this toxic waste plant. He said, what you do is you spray out toxic waste vats with sulfuric acid. I'm like, okay. I got my hazmat suit on. I'm spraying out these toxic waste vats. He said, all right, it's the end of your shift. I want you to go ahead and drink some of that sulfuric acid. And I said, that's ridiculous. That would kill me. There you go. Painted myself right into a damn corner. But what it did was it gave me the idea, and it gave me this, changed my perception on exactly what alcohol was. Alcohol for me is no different than drinking sulfuric acid. And that goes with anything, any of this mind altering stuff. You know, it's always more for me. So I have to recognize if I don't put it in me, chances are I don't want any more of it. You know, as long as I continue to stay connected into this program, and I do those 5 things, those 5 simple things, I've got a pretty good shot of staying sober today. You know, the more I stay connected, the more I've got. Look, I'm not a big fan of accountability, but accountability keeps me sober. That's what the people in these rooms help with. You know, I've got a handful of guys that I work with on a daily basis who are working programs and staying sober. That's part of my accountability. It's all the stuff that we don't like, you know, as people that are, pre-recovery. I don't want to be told what to do. I want to do what I want. You know, I'm going to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And that's all there is to it. And look, you know, that works out all well and good till it doesn't anymore. You know, my best thinking got me into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And honestly, I couldn't be more grateful for it. It has given me today. It has given me a life that I couldn't have scripted any of this stuff. You know, the last year, you know, for a lot of people, it's been a bit tumultuous. I've had some things happen in my personal life that I never expected would happen, but I didn't pick up a drink over it. I've had some things happen in my professional life that I never thought would happen, but I didn't have to pick up a drink over it. You know, I've recognized that even on my worst days, if I can, if I can turn to the stuff that works, because I've seen it work in my life and in others, I have the ability to stay sober. I have the ability to work through those problems. I have the ability to use some of the tools that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has given me. And it's not easy at first. If it were easy, everybody'd be sober. You know, it takes work, and man, it is frustrating. But it's worth it, you know, to be able to work with other guys and see the light go off in their eyes, and to see the lives that they begin to build. Not because of anything that I've done. That's not it. I'm just there to pick up the phone and help them work through the steps. You know, I don't play a part in that other than sort of just hanging around and answering when they call. But for it to start working in their lives is really a beautiful thing. And, you know, that helps keep me sober on a daily basis. You know, today I've got an uncountable number of things to live for. And that wasn't the case. You know, when I first showed up in the rooms, not quite 5 years ago, I was just trying to hang on to what I had. And today I don't have to live like that. You know, I've learned how to unplug from sort of this material idea. I've learned how to plug into a little bit more of a spiritual life. You know, it's a bit of a challenge for me at times. But it just, again, it takes practice. You know, I hear a lot lately, this idea of practice, and there are a lot of practices. You know, I have to practice recovery on a daily basis. You know, the parts of my program that I have to practice are prayer and meditation. And I'm still working on those. I have to practice. One of my big practices is not always saying what the first thought in my head is. You know, try to be a little more gentle, a little more kind with people around me. Understand I don't always know what's going on in their lives, and it's not my job to tell them. You know, I don't have to browbeat people into thinking that I'm right. You know, that's not for me to do anymore. You know, my job is simply, and this was taught to me in the very beginning, stay sober and do the next right thing. That concept is a lot easier for me when I'm engaged in a program of recovery and I'm spending time around people that are staying sober and doing the next right thing. At this point, I don't know really what's going to happen next, but I know that, that this recovery lifestyle it's a way of life for me. It's not just what I have to do. It's become what I want to do. I have reaped some fruits and some joys from this way of life. And it's stuff that I never thought would happen. You know, I've built relationships, rebuilt relationships. I've met people that have just been wonderful blessings. And, that's what this thing is all about. You know, if you're on the fence about it, you know, I implore you to give it all you got. You know, give it that 90 and 90 idea. Go to 90 meetings in 90 days. Get a sponsor, work some steps if that's the path that you choose. Whatever it is, you know, people like us, people in recovery or pre-recovery, we don't, look, when we're on the fence, we fall off one way or the other. I was fortunate enough to fall off on the side of recovery. But there were times when I was really close to falling the other way. I came into the rooms, 51% of me wanted to stay sober, and 49% of me wanted to drink. And because I decided to continue to fill this 51% side up with recovery stuff, you know, today I can say without question, I'm 100% in zero. Like there's nothing that can happen in my life that makes a drink or a drug look like a good idea. And, you know, that's taken a lot of practice and a lot of time. I've gotten rid of a lot of reservations, and, you know, today is just about showing up. It's about being present. It's about living in today. And, you know, if somebody asks you to do something, do it. You know, I've enjoyed the heck out of being here today. And, you know, if there's anything I can ever do to help you, just say the word. Thanks. End it.
Just mute both of them. You and turn off the video.
Oh, hey, I'm not gone, guys.
All right. Well, that's what we got for Voices of Recovery today. Thank you, Brad, for coming and sharing with us, and we'll see y'all next time.